Good morning, Year 6, and welcome to Friday's literacy lesson. I hope you've got that Friday feeling. And we've only got one more week of home learning before we're back in school. Hooray! Okay, so it is Friday, so we're going to start with our spelling test. So hopefully lots of 10s out of 10 because you've been working so hard on them. So as always, you can either use your purple book and get someone to test you, or you can do it on Edshed, but don't forget to send me your score. Pause the video, off you go with your spelling test. Okay, Year 6, we're now going to move into our handwriting. And again, what I've done is I've looked at letters of the alphabet. We're going to have a look at G today. And I've selected words from our text, which we're going to be looking at shortly. Okay, so we've got our nice loops for our G's. So we're going to start off with good night. Okay, so remember the G sits on the line. I lead into the G, loop into the two O's, tall, D, into the N, I, G sits on the line again, H, T. And then I can cross and I can dot. Then we've got slightly, so we'll lead into the S, tall L, I, G, H, T, L, and then we've got a looped Y as well. Okay, and then you could dot and cross. And we've got quite a long word, apologetically. So I've got the A, P, O, L, O, loop G into the T, I, C, L, L, Y. Okay, started a little bit high off on there, so I'm not quite happy with that one. So I'm going to have another little go at that. So try again. A, P, O, L, O, looped G, T, I, C, A, double L, Y. That looks a bit better. Okay, so now I'm going to scroll up and we've got religious and we've got grey. Okay, the last two that we need to do. So RELIGIOUS. I'm going to do it a little bit more because I want that L a little bit taller. Okay, so lead into the RELIGIOUS. That looks a bit better. Okay, and then finally grey. Lead into the G, R-E-Y, and the G and the Y sit nicely on the line. I'm going to try again. Loop into the G, R-E-Y. Okay, so you've got some words on the board that you are going to practice. Let's see that you can get those nice G's going. So, purple book, you're going to have a go. 2 lines of good night, 2 lines of slightly, 2 lines of apologetically, 2 lines of religious, and 2 lines of grey. Okay, you might want to leave a line between because we're practicing those descenders today. So you really want to make sure that it is they're nice and neatly done. Okay, so good luck with those. Pause the video, off you go. Right, I did say that today we are going to be looking at a reading text, and it's absolutely one of my favourites. I love Good Night, Mr. Tom. Okay, so you will find it on page 10 of your booklet. Okay, the one with the owl on it. So page 10. And what I want you to do is there are some characters that appear in this story. We've got Tom Oakley, who's a farmer. We've got a billeting officer because it's set in the war. And we've been looking at the war this week and we've been thinking about sort of, what kind of things happen. And one of the things that you were interested in was what happened to children during the war. And many of them were evacuated out of cities that were in danger of being bombed. So there would be a billeting officer, and what the billeting officer was in charge of was making sure that the evacuees that came into the countryside were matched up with families who would take them in. Okay, so you've got Tom Oakley, you've got the billeting officer, and you've got the evacuees. And what I want you to do is I want you to read through the text really, really carefully. And I would like you to pick out any words or phrases that describe Tom Oakley, any that describe the billeting officer, and any that describe the evacuees. And I want you to really go to town, have a look, really carefully scan that text and find me some words. All right, so pause the video. You will need your purple book. You'll need something to write with. Put the heading Tom Oakley, billeting officer, the evacuees, and then find me those different words and phrases. Okay, off you go. Okay, year 6, let's have a look then at the text. And as I say, it's one of my absolute favourites. Now, if you've got the text in front of you, it's all the better because you can see it much better than on the screen. Okay, so good night, Mr. Tom. And it's a story that's set during the Second World War. So people were worried about British cities being bombed, and so thousands of children were evacuated from cities to the safety of the countryside. And Goodnight, Mr. Tom tells the story of one of those evacuees. And it's about a boy, and he's taken in by Mr. Tom Oakley, this gruff farmer, as we meet, who I'm not going to give anything away, but he is he's one of my favourite characters. Okay, so let's have a look at the text then. So it says, "Yes," said Tom bluntly on opening the front door. "What do you want?" So bluntly, he's not opened it politely. He's not said, "Hello, are you okay? What's the matter?" It's like, "Yes." So, he obviously is a person who doesn't like to be disturbed. So, "Yes," said Tom bluntly on opening the front door. "What do you want?" A harassed middle woman in a green coat and felt hat stood on his step. So harassed, this person has had a really hard day. She's trying to encourage families to take in these children that have arrived in the village who need, a home because their homes aren't safe during the war. And it isn't a popular job. She is not a popular person in the village because it's another mouth to feed when food is scarce. Okay, so this is why she's harassed. Harassed means she's frazzled, she's worried, she's she's just feeling as if everybody is against her. Okay, perhaps she's had lots of people shouting or shutting the door in her face. So she's in a green coat and a felt hat, stood on his step. He glanced at the armband on her sleeve. During the war, you very often had an armband that would tell you what kind of role you'd got. Okay. She gave him an awkward smile. She's asking a huge favour. So, and perhaps Tom has got a bit of a reputation in the village as being not so friendly, and she is a bit concerned about how he's going to treat her. I'm the billeting officer, and if you look at your glossary, it tells you that the billeting officer is the person in charge of finding homes for evacuees. Okay, so she's the billeting officer for the area, she began. "Oh yeah, what's that got to do with me?" And you've got that "with me." So it's sort of that dialect, okay? So you've got an idea that he's showing you that he lives in that area, and that's how he talks. She doesn't talk like that because she's possibly come from London or somewhere, but he's a local and he's using the local dialect with me. So he's not using the th at the end, the "with me." She flushed slightly. Okay, so she's a little bit embarrassed. "Well, Mr. Mr. Oakley, Thomas Oakley." Thank you, Mr. Oakley." She paused and took a deep breath. "Mr. Oakley, with the declaration of war imminent." Tom waved his hand. "I knows all that. Get to the point." So again, we've got some dialect coming in. "I knows. Get to the point." So get to the point. "What do you want?" He noticed a small boy at her side. "It's him I've come about," she said. I'm on my way to your village hall with the others. What others? She stepped to one side, and behind the large iron gate, which stood at the end of the graveyard, were a small group of children. So these are the other evacuees. Many of them were filthy and very poorly clad. And clad, it's got an asterisk. If you look at your um, glossary, it means dressed. Okay. Only a handful had a blazer or a coat. So they've come from a poorer area, okay, and they've probably not got a lot of money anyway, and so they've with being evacuated, they've not got the dressed properly. They've not perhaps come with much, and it's a very terrible time, and it must have been so scary for these children during the war. I don't know how they coped. So they all look bewildered and exhausted. So they're just frightened, as we said. They've moved to a completely different area. They've perhaps been traveling for a long, long time. Some of them will never have seen the countryside. They were born in a city. They've stayed in the city. They won't have seen fields and animals, and they're absolutely frightened, terrified. Only one tiny dark-haired girl in the front was hanging firmly onto a new teddy bear. So she's been given this gift. Maybe it's the last gift of her parents, and she's holding on to it as if it's her one link with home. So she's clasping it. She's frightened to death that she doesn't lose it. It's giving her that little bit of comfort. The woman touched the boy at her side and pushed him forward. I'm just going to scroll up a bit. Okay. There's no need to tell me, said Tom. It's obligatory and it's for the war effort. You are entitled to choose your child, I know, began the woman apologetically. Tom gave a snort. So he obviously is informed. He knows that people in the countryside, it was their duty to take these children in. Doesn't mean that it was willingly. They knew they had to do it for the war effort, and you get that idea. Okay, no need to tell me. Okay, there's no need, and again, it's that sort of he's not putting there is no need. It's there's no need, so it's that dialect. It's obligatory. You've got to do it. Okay, it's an order. That's what was expected by the government, and it's for the war effort. So what happened is that you could go. These children will go to the village hall, and families who are willing to take the children in will go and they'll choose one. So must have been absolutely frightening and scared to death, these children. So Tom gave a snort, so it's that kind of thing. But she continued, his mother wants him to be with someone who's religious or near a church. Well, we've had a clue that he must be near the cemetery because it said about the graveyard. Do you remember up here? It said about the large iron gate which stood at the end of the graveyard. So he must live near the church. So obviously this evacuee's mother has said he wants him to be with someone who's religious or near a church. She was quite adamant. If you look at your glossary, unwilling to compromise. She was adamant that's where he's got to go. If I've got to let my son be evacuated, then he's got to go to somebody who's religious or lives near a church. Okay. Said she would only let him be evacuated if he was. Was what? Asked Tom impatiently. Near a church. So the woman's getting, sort of perhaps a little bit exasperated here. Tom took a second look at the child. The boy was thin and sickly looking, pale, with limp, sandy hair and dull grey eyes. So you get the idea that this boy perhaps, again, lives in an area where he hasn't got much. Perhaps his family are poor. So he's not being well fed. He's not well nourished because he's pale, he's sickly looking, he's thin, his eyes are dull. So it's that idea, he's again, he might be frightened and it might be ill. And he's got limp, sandy hair. So everything about him is telling you that he's not well or he's not well nourished, and he needs some TLC, some tender loving care. Okay. So now we've had a little look through the questions. We're going to have through the text, sorry, we're going to have a little look through the questions. So we've got question 1. Why doesn't the author use standard English for Tom's speech? So we've gone back, we remember what I talked about. Here he is, he lives in the countryside. So perhaps it's telling you that we're now in the countryside, we're not in the city. So he's going to talk as a local. So think about that for that question. So how do you think the billeting officer feels when she's talking to Tom? Explain your answer. Well, here I'm expecting you to refer to some things. So do you remember? So she paused and she took a deep breath. She flushed slightly. She gave him an awkward smile. So when you're answering that question, I want to see, I think she felt, okay, because it says in the text, this shows that she was. Okay, so I might say for that question that she was embarrassed because it says in the text she flushed slightly. This shows that she knew she was going to be asking Tom a really huge favour, and he might turn her down, and she's running out of options. Okay, so something like that for that answer. So then if we have a little look at question 3 then, it says, question 3, write down a word that the author could have used instead of bewildered in line 16. So look it up in an online dictionary or thesaurus. Look it up. What word could be used instead of bewildered? Read it in context. What word could you use? So then we've got, what effect does line 17 have on the reader? So if we look back at line 17, okay. So we've got one tiny dark-haired girl in the front was hanging firmly onto a new teddy bear. So how do you think, what does that do? Okay, what does that make you feel? So what effect does it have on the reader? Okay, it's asking you, how does that make you feel? Then, does Tom have to take in an evacuee? Explain your answer. Well, we've talked about that. What does Tom say? He says it's obligatory and it's for the war effort. So what does that tell you? Does he have to take him in? But give that little bit of an explanation. If you're not sure about obligatory, then you can go back and listen to what we said as we were talking through the text, or look it up in an online dictionary or thesaurus. Okay. So then give one reason why the author might have chosen to include a lot of speech in this text. So why might they have done that? We've got this conversation between the billeting officer and this Mr. Tom Oakley. So what might be the purpose of that? Okay, is it to tell you more about Tom's character? Is it to sort of show you that she was trying to persuade, and that he was a bit reluctant? So it's that kind of discussion going on. Is it to tell you more about sort of the evacuees? So why do you think there's more direct speech going on in that? Why we've got the conversation going backwards and forwards? And then it's, do you think that Tom and the boy will get on? So that's the last question there. So do you think Tom and the boy will get on? Explain your answer. So you've got this gruff Tom. You've got this sickly, pale evacuee boy. And he's sort of, at the end, it's sort of, you've got Tom looks at him. And I think, he maybe, is he wavering? Is he going to take him in? Is he going to feed him up? Is he going to get to know him? And, so it's your opinion here. There isn't a right and a wrong answer. Okay, but what do you think? Remember, the title is Good Night, Mr. Tom. So might give you a clue that perhaps they perhaps get on, or you may think, well, no, that doesn't give me a clue. Okay, but have a look at that. Okay, so when you finish the questions, you are going to have a little look at the challenge. Now, the challenge is this. Excuse me. I want you to use the information from page 10 to create a little paragraph as if you are the boy evacuee. So you are standing there, you're watching this conversation going on, you know that you've seen the other children there. How are you feeling? What can you see? What can you hear? What can you smell? That might be strange because you're now in the countryside. So think about it. Lots of farms around and things like that. What might he be hearing that if he's been in the middle of a city, he won't have ever been to the countryside before? What might he be thinking, and what can he hear and smell and see? You need to use first person because you are the evacuee. So we'll have to see I, me, mine being used throughout. Okay, so don't talk about the boy, it's me, I. All right, so it's a paragraph. I don't want a whole story, but a paragraph just based on that text that we've seen. So, what do you think of Tom Oakley? What do you think of the billeting officer? Do you want to be evacuated? Do you want to be home? Did you feel safe there? Is this too strange? Are you not feeling well? So, all of those things I would like you to put into a little paragraph about that text. Okay. I hope you have fun with it, and I hope you have a lovely, lovely Friday. And I will see you for our last week of home learning starting on Monday. Have a lovely day. Have a lovely weekend. Bye bye.